tea, Earl Grey, hot. Nerd shout out. This is my favorite mug. Very good friend of mine got this for me for either my birthday or Christmas. But I am a big Arizona Cardinals fan. I grew up in Arizona, for those of you who don't already know that. This is the only mug I need, frankly. Coffee, tea, I could put gin in here, whiskey. Now, whiskey is a little bit heretical. I do have a snifter and a tumbler. I have to admit, I do need at least one of those two for whiskey, because you can't really drink whiskey in a coffee mug. I mean, come on. But for anything else, honestly, like, especially for any hot drink, this is the only mug I need. That, my friends, is an example of minimalism. I don't need 20 mugs. I don't need 10 mugs. I don't need one that says best dad, best supervisor. I don't need one that says some pithy phrase from my favorite TV show. I'm not going to read the whole thing on my shirt. Those of you who have seen that show, you know what this is. I'm not going to read the whole thing for sake of avoiding copyright infringement. Anyway, minimalism, right? I don't need more than one mug. This is an awesome mug. I love this mug. It's got a nice, good weight to it. It's heavy, but not too heavy. Keeps my drinks warm as long as I need it to. And I have a microwave for times where I forget to finish it and need to rewarm it. It's the only mug I need. I have other mugs, and honestly, I need to get rid of my other mugs, and that is something I'm going to do this week. Because I am trying to live a more minimalist lifestyle, and it's hard. Ask yourself, as I'm asking myself, why you can't part with your things. This is a question posed by Fumio Sasaki, the author of the book Goodbye Things. It was originally written in Japanese. It's been translated to English, so I will not even attempt to say the Japanese title. But in English, it's Goodbye Things, which was obviously calculated. It's very catchy. It hits you emotionally, and it's very short, which fits perfectly with what his book is about. And in it, he describes his personal journey towards a minimalist lifestyle. He was not the founder, if you will, of the Japanese minimalist movement. There are others who kind of spearheaded that and popularized it, but he followed behind and saw the value in it for himself. And he chronicles his journey. He gives you pictures. Now, I had the Kindle edition, but when I first read the book, it was from my local library, actually. I was walking past the new book display, and beautiful cover. It's very simple. It's just like a wooden shelf attached to a wall, and there's I think a bamboo cup and maybe one other item just sitting right there, just elegantly posed. Very simple design, and the title, like I said, really short, Goodbye Things. So it caught my attention, and I started reading it, and I realized I need to implement this in my life. It's not that I never thought of the concepts that you find in minimalism, like the idea of owning less things, of being less attached to your things. Some of those are taught in Christianity, obviously, like the idea of, now it's a little broader than just your material possessions, but do not love the things of this world. Jesus taught something similar, don't lay up treasures here on earth, right? Kind of that concept. But you see it repeated in other wisdom traditions as well. Gautama Buddha taught the concepts of non-attachment, which includes non-attachment to material things. As I understand it, He was of the nobility there in his country, and he forsook his status and his wealth, and basically lived an ascetic lifestyle, or at least what we might call today a monastic lifestyle. Like he lived by choice, lived very simply, what many would call in poverty, but he did so by choice. Like, he wanted to free himself of attachment to material things. And as the story goes, he, at one point in his life, sat in front of a tree and stayed there until he achieved enlightenment. I forget how long he supposedly stayed there. There's probably different accounts. But the general idea is leaving behind attachment to material things, material possessions, for something more meaningful. And as I said, it's taught in other traditions. In Christian traditions, it's taught. I think Taoism probably advocates for something similar. Like, it's not the first time or the last time humans have come up with this. And you see in human society, these ideas tend to cycle around, right? So over the last 150 to 200 years, you have industrialization has enabled us to begin mass producing our tools, if you will. Begin mass producing tables or chairs or automobiles, or later on telephones and cell phones and computers and whatever you want to name. We have the ability to mass produce it, and you start getting into concepts like Lean Six Sigma, which is, for those of you that work in the manufacturing world, this is very popular concept right now. A lot of companies are implementing, including mine, the idea of lean manufacturing, which essentially is eliminating the idea of eliminating as much waste as you can. Wasted movement, wasted inventory, like unnecessary inventory in your plant. You could, I suppose, apply it to unnecessary personnel. Like, we don't need this position, we don't need that position, but it's geared more towards like processes, like eliminating the extra steps, wasted movement, wasted physical energy for the worker, and excess inventory, etc., with the idea of being able to produce things more efficiently. Now, the downside to that is that means that as plants get more efficient, they could potentially produce more and more and more and more and more stuff. So that's the downside of those improvements, is that the companies that have as their priority producing as much crap as possible to sell it, and are willing to work their 3 shifts at their plant 24/7, with little to no regard for their employees' health. They can do that. But my company, I'm not going to name it because I don't like to give a lot of personal details out here that identify my location and things like that, for safety reasons. But my company is relatively small, but we are implementing that, but not for the purpose of eventually being able to run like 3 crazy shifts and it is, we want to be able to meet our goals and to continue with what we hope to be increasing demand for our product without having to work our employees overtime, so that we can go home. This is part of the reason, I know, like, go home and be with our families. We don't need to be giving more than 40 hours a week to any job, in my opinion. Like, I don't think any job should get more than 40 hours a week. Why? I mean, to what end? Like, I understand there's like maybe particular crisis situations where you have to meet a deadline, or there's like medical emergencies as a doctor, but like, I don't think it's healthy, generally speaking, for people to work more than that. Like, it's better to work less hours more efficiently, and more productively, than to work longer hours and be exhausted and be less efficient and just, Anyway, that's in the corporate sphere. So that's important, and that's something I want to get better at in my own job, but I also want to apply some of those principles to my day-to-day life as well, as it is of minimalism. So, getting back to the question that Fumio Sasaki asks, he says, ask yourself why you can't part with your things. I'm going to quote from his book here. He says, there probably aren't many people who will suddenly decide to reduce the number of possessions that they have and become a minimalist overnight. As I said earlier, the act of discarding things is a skill. It'll be hard at first to place your possessions in a trash bag or put them up for sale. There are still a lot of items that I can't get around to throwing away myself. But it isn't something to be embarrassed about. And there's no need to get rid of everything at once. I think it's important to think about why there are some things that we can't part with. Take a minute to really focus on each item you can't part with and ask yourself, why? Is it because it was expensive? Is it because you feel guilty about throwing it away? Are you ashamed that you were never able to make good use of it? Do you feel bad for the person who gave it to you? Does it feel like you're throwing away a fond memory that is attached to it? Is your vanity preventing you from parting with something? Or is it just easier to leave it where it is? Don't worry if you can't discard your possessions all at once. The important thing is to ask yourself why you may be reluctant to part with some of your belongings. You might be surprised by the answers. So, he's pretty vulnerable in sharing his own story, and the questions he asked are are these potential reasons why you don't want to let go? I think those are fairly common, in our attachment to stuff. I know marketing doesn't help, and I'm not here to bash marketers. I think you can do it in a way that's honest, that also benefits humanity, and I am seeing more of that in recent days, like advertising that has as its goal making a positive impact on society and not merely selling its product. I appreciate that, but for every advertiser like that, there are others who have no qualms about hiring a psychologist who is willing to help them understand how the human mind and the human brain work well enough that they can design their advertisements to prime you to make decisions emotionally and without engaging your prefrontal cortex very much, without engaging your cognitive reasoning very much, but where you've been primed to make a decision to say, I'm going to buy that, before you even are aware of the fact that you want to buy it. You know what I'm saying? Like, before your prefrontal cortex or your higher reasoning, if you will, becomes aware of the fact that, I would like to buy that, they've already primed you emotionally, to want it. And in many cases you go ahead and get it. Or at least it's very hard not to. And there's a lot of tactics they can use to do that. Fear of missing out, FOMO, all my friends over there have it, I really need that new iPhone, or, the iPhone 12, I only have a 10, I need the 12, damn it. Or, my MacBook is 3 years old, I don't have a MacBook, but I'm just using that as an example. Or I have a Toshiba laptop. My Toshiba is, at one point, my previous Toshiba, before I replaced it this past year, it was 12 years old. And it was still working. The only reason I had to replace it, honestly, was because it couldn't handle the bandwidth required to run the internet. As far as internal programs, it ran great. It was still working well. But I couldn't use the internet anymore because it was just so damn slow. I waited 12 years, and it was still running, Anyway, I digress. Why is it so hard? I think it is. We develop an emotional attachment to it. We find some sense of security in our possessions or in wanting it. For me, I'll give an example where I'm kind of vulnerable myself. For me, books. I am a self-proclaimed nerd. I am also an Enneagram 5, so I love gathering information. I fucking love it. And it's also one of the ways I protect myself. It's one of the ways, if I feel threatened for whatever reason, or if I have a problem that comes up, my first instinct is to gather information, to gather all the relevant, or at least what I deem to be relevant information, collate it, analyze it and try to synthesize it, and come to a conclusion or a decision or a course of action, etc. So I tend to cling to information. I'd be ashamed to admit how many books and book samples I have on my Kindle right now. I don't even know. I'm sure it's at least 3 or 4 dozen. And not too long ago, I had over 300 books. Now, some of these were books that other people had given to me who were trying to minimalize their own libraries. They're like, hey, you want some books? And I'm like, yes, information, give it to me. I had over 300 books. I had 2 large bookcases that were filled with books. I had another small bookcase, I think, in my closet that was filled with books. I had boxes with books in my attic. I had over 300 books, most of which I had never read or had only read part of. And as I believe this was after I started reading Sasaki's book, I was like, I need to get rid of some of these. So I finally, this past year, I believe it was during 2020, forced myself to whittle down the amount of books I had from over 300 to around 100. Got rid of both of our large bookshelves, bought a single, smaller, very nice bookshelf from IKEA. It's a beautiful charcoal gray color, and it's just sturdy bookshelf, or at least it looks beautiful over there in the corner. And my goal was to say I'm only going to own as many books as will fit on this bookshelf, and if I want to buy a new book, I have to get rid of one from the bookshelf. Those were my intentions. I have not quite lived up to that, and I was reminded of that, and I need to get rid of a few and pare it down again. It's really hard, because there's something about having all that information accessible, I think, because I want to understand everything. I want to understand it, and I want to have access to ready information so I can make good decisions. I'm not knocking that. It's important. And the internet is particularly useful for that. But in terms of having a bunch of physical books around, I don't have to have that many. It's what libraries are for, Richard. That's what libraries are for. So honestly, I need to stop buying books for a while and just use my local library as a resource. When I really want to read a book, go see if my library has